My name is Katya Veleva. I'm the mentoring lead for Women in BIM, and I'm here today to talk to you about mentoring, and specifically mentoring for diverse groups. First, we're just going to look at why I'm someone who is qualified to talk to you about this, and then why is mentoring for diversity important. Then we're going to look at the different types of intervention you can have to support the growth in someone's life, may that be professional or personal. And then we're going to focus on a specific tool that you can apply as a mentor, but really in other professional situations as well. So let's start. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I have background in architecture. My career has then moved on to interior design, to then transition into architectural technology and digital construction. But the one thing that has been consistent throughout my career and that weaved its way around every position that I've had has been mentoring. This photo was taken at my very first day when I arrived to the UK for university in the University of Portsmouth, and this is where my mentoring journey began. University of Portsmouth would collaborate at that time with an organization called Aim Higher. Now, unfortunately, this organization no longer exists, but in the early 2000s, Aim Higher would support pupils from around the country from areas and schools that are not expected to produce many university students. They would support these pupils to indeed aim higher. Now, they gave me my very first mentoring training, and with them I started to support long-term pupils from the Portsmouth area, and additionally produce various one-off workshops for students from all around to show them what the university experience may look like. Following that, as my professional career became, I worked a little bit as a personal tutor, which was similar to mentoring relationship. Then in the companies that I've worked in, I have been heavily involved in designing work experience programs for students that will come to get to know the workplace. Eventually, I started to volunteer with various organizations to actually be a formal mentor. First, I worked with the Stephen Lawrence Trust. Then I collaborated with Built by Us for their mentoring program called Fluid. And then in my position on the core team of Women in BIM, I started fostering the idea of a Women in BIM mentoring program, which has now become a reality of an international mentoring program, which I'm very, very proud of. This particular program was actually heavily influenced by the Built by Us mentoring program. All of this experience then led me to pursue some coaching qualifications as well. So this is something that's really dear to my heart, and I apply a lot of experience from various backgrounds. Having had all this experience, I have had the opportunity to reflect quite a bit on the way I think, what is it that has attracted me to mentoring, and why dare I say I am a good mentor. I look back on the people that I work with, my superiors, I look back on my teachers, and eventually it led me to this cool chick over here. And now, apart from obviously having an indie album about to drop, this happens to be my mom here in the middle. I see my mom as my very first mentor. And the really, really powerful thing that she did, no matter how young I was, no matter how messy my room was, she would always address me as an equal. And that's a powerful, powerful move that could truly foster and build confidence in a young person, and a real ability to communicate. One of the many things that she did to make me feel like this would be to allow me to address older people just by their name. Now, back home in Bulgaria, it's common, it's custom to address people of your parents' age with auntie and uncle. In Western countries, you go Mr. and Mrs. And it's a respectful address, but also it is a very clear indicator of a power difference, so kids know where their place is. Now, my mom was beyond that sort of thing. She would simply say, oh, well, they're not your actual aunties and uncles. But there was more beyond that. Not only did she let me address other adults by name, she would always introduce herself to my little friends as simply Petya. That made me feel really cool. But it really, really gave me a sense of importance. It gave me a sense of confidence and stability in my own personhood, which is not something that's easy to obtain at all. And it made me capable of addressing people with realistically more power than me in an equal level. Now, when we continue to talk about mentoring, you see how important this is to me, because it's very difficult to pursue any improvement or authentic communication when you are indeed talking from different levels at each other. And indeed, this is what I want to talk to you about today, is how to foster these kind of relationships so that your mentoring is effective. And now, after I've had a chance to tell you a little bit about my mom, let's look into the importance of diversity mentoring. Now, this specific topic, I feel, splits into two separate, distinct aspects. First, I really want to emphasize on why diversity and inclusion are important, and then we're going to go ahead and focus on diversity mentoring specifically. When we're talking about diversity and inclusion, it's impossible not to address the zeitgeist. We live in the year 2020. We experience a combination of various movements aiming to educate about the effects of various different kinds of oppression based on race, sexuality, gender identity. All of us are learning more, and all of us are investigating our own positions and privileges in life. Because of that, I would like to share my own intersection of identity with you so that my perspective becomes a little bit clearer. I myself am a queer immigrant woman. Now, an immigrant is an interesting position, especially looking at ethnic diversity and racial injustices. The way I have grown up has been on the privileged side of racial identity, of race identity. However, then I moved on to choosing to live in a different country, and I have been on the other side now, and I have experienced here in the UK very clear forms of racism. I have had people entirely cut me off as they've learned I'm Bulgarian. Before I started my professional life, I spent months and months sending out CVs to only then decide to remove any reference from Bulgaria and then get a job within a month. So this is something I have become familiar with. And the very valuable thing that I have learned from these experiences is that my own ethnic/racial identity doesn't really belong to me. It has been important for me to understand that, because now I can step back and educate myself on the ways that people perceive me, so that then I'm prepared for the effects that will have on my existence as a whole. And again, I'm very well aware that people would look at me and say, how dare you talk about topics like this? You're not ethnically diverse. While other people look at me and say, well, honey, you're not exactly white, are you? I have been told that more than once. So this is how things are, and I have chosen to share that experience because I believe it is shared, and I believe that it is important that we learn more about each other. And now back to why diversity and inclusion are important. Now, there are several models that help us understand this a little bit better, and the first one I would like to look at is the legal model. Now, in the UK, we have something called the Diversity and Inclusion Act from 2010 that protects certain characteristics from being discriminated against. There's a list of them that you can look up, and if you investigate this list a little bit further, you can see that it's still not ideal for gender non-conforming people, trans people, non-binary people, but of course it is a law that exists there to protect from discrimination, and that's not the case in many other countries. Now, I would like to invite you to think about why was it important to build these protections into the law. It's usually because things like that were happening. Discrimination was indeed happening. And in order to explain this a little bit better as well, I would like us to look at unconscious bias. Now, this is something that is very, very hardwired into our brains. The way our minds work, at any given time, it may be that they may be computing up to 11 million bits of information. It is a powerful machine you have up here. But in order for this machine to work efficiently, it does take a lot of shortcuts. These shortcuts are actually neural pathways built over millennia. So you can't change them that quickly. And it's not necessary that we're built to want to change them, because if you think about it, when thousands of years ago humans were just gathering berries in the floor of the jungle or in the savannah, if they sensed with their peripheral vision that something was hurling at them, it didn't really matter whether that was a panther or a tiger. They just knew that they had to be out of there. These shortcuts, these assumptions of danger would save lives. And things that we know save our life, we just build into our instinctual responses and we don't even think about it because we know it's essential. We build those systems of assumptions and keys that trigger certain reactions in us with our environments. So if we listen to stories that constantly tell us that certain people are good at this, that certain people are bad at this, we learn that. We build those neural pathways and we treat them very similarly to danger of death, which they are not. Not to mention that in the concrete jungles that we live in, there are no tigers and panthers. And so the really uncomfortable truth that we need to learn is that all of our brains are built this way. And actually, we are all sexist and we're all racist. That's not a good thing, but the only way to change it is to become aware of it and admit it. Because they say that the worst unconscious bias is what's called the Uber bias, essentially not acknowledging your bias and thinking that, oh, now I've heard about this and I'm fine, I'm not racist, I'm not sexist anymore. But you can't just change like this. You need to become aware of the subconscious mind's work and how it's affecting the thinking that you're applying to your decision making. And so then once we have become aware of this and we have started really applying it to the decisions that we're making, we can move on to the social model, which states that with decisions such as this, we can create a fairer world, and a fairer world is better for everyone. But I can clearly understand if that's not enough. And if you want to move on to harder data and orient yourself to the business and profit side of things, we can look at the business model. A lot of work has been done in terms of research on diversity and inclusion in the world of business. And I would urge you, when you search further into that area, to think about bits of research that truly include diversity and inclusion, because diversity without inclusion doesn't work the same way and you can get very different results. As I said, there's been a lot of research done and I would like to focus on one particular bit of research. Dr. Katya Veleva was interested in looking at decision making in different kinds of groups. So she established a study with some homogeneous and some diverse groups and she observed their decision making. What she discovered was that very, very clearly diverse groups were outperforming homogeneous groups. They were making better and more accurate decisions. She then looked at how these groups perceived their own effectiveness and discovered there was a different correlation there, and the homogeneous groups felt much more effective. They got their decisions quicker and they felt like they were doing less work. And similarly, when she looked at the confidence these groups had in their own decisions and in the work that they've done, the homogeneous groups were still scoring better. And what I think it's important to take out of this is that diversity is not easy. And that's the good thing about it. Because in a diverse group, everyone is pushed to work harder to then see the world from more perspectives and then be pushed into making better decisions. And the other important thing is that diversity doesn't work without inclusion. Because even if you insert different people in the group, if the rules are already established and if you know that certain opinions are listened to more than others, those diverse people are not going to strive to express their own different experience, but instead are going to try to blend in. Another very interesting bit of research that she's done has been on governmental level, leadership level, and she proved that countries that are very diverse thrive under inclusive female leadership and don't perform nearly as well under male leadership. So that's a very interesting thing to think about. And that conveniently leads us to diversity mentoring, because diversity mentoring is a tool for inclusion. And when I say diversity mentoring, what I mean is formal diversity mentoring. Now, mentoring always happens And several studies show us that when that does happen, it leads to something that's called the cloning phenomenon or homophily. So leadership, the people who are capable of mentoring and have something to give, usually would be attracted naturally to people that look like them. And so people who are marginalized or from diverse groups don't necessarily have this opportunity to learn from and receive that mentorship. And because of this cloning phenomenon, organic mentoring will only lead to feeding in the same type of leadership that has already existed. And here is where formal mentoring for a specific diversity group becomes very valuable, because it offers an opportunity to kind of stop and think, oh wait, where are all the efforts going, and can we disperse them more evenly to everyone? Because inevitably people from diverse backgrounds will come through the door with certain disadvantages and fewer opportunities. Now, we can talk about this forever, but we're here to talk about mentoring, so I'll just give you a couple of pointers to where you can do more research if you're interested in the topic. A book that I would recommend, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, is an excellent book on race in the UK. It's actually over here. And something else I would recommend if you're interested in knowing more about gender and the oppressions of gender is Sex and World Peace. Another book I happen to have just behind me, Sex and World Peace. It's a little bit more of an academic piece of writing, but it is excellent for gathering some data, hard data on what are the effects of the way we perceive gender in the world overall. And now, before we move on to the next section of this talk, I would like to invite you to consider the words of an icon of mine, Gloria Steinem. She says, always ask the turtle. Now, what does that mean? There's a beautiful story in one of her books, and yes, I do have it over here. There it is. It's called My Life on the Road. So in here, she tells the story of college field trip that she had in the desert. She was doing an archaeology degree, and they were looking at the rocks, investigating, and she noticed next to a mud road a turtle. It was obvious to Gloria that that turtle was out of place. The stream was all the way down, and she took it upon herself to fix this, because it was really clear to her that this animal would be killed by a passing vehicle very soon. So she pulled and tugged. It wasn't easy. The turtle wasn't going on with her, but finally she got it into the stream. The turtle was swimming off to the sunset. Gloria stood up, feeling very good about herself, that she did a good thing. She helped the turtle. And then she heard in the background a voice saying, interesting. This turtle probably spent the last month trying to climb all the way up to the hill, to the mud next to the road so it could lay its eggs. Gloria says it took her years to truly understand this lesson. And this is what I want to start off with when we're talking about mentoring. It is key to ask the turtle if she needs the help, because you can't really support anyone, even if you're convinced that they need that help, if they haven't truly realized that they do. So make sure you ask whether the help is wanted and what help is needed, because then it's going to be truly efficient and beneficial. And now on to the other methods of support you could provide people. In order to truly understand mentoring, it's a really good idea to kind of see it in the context of other potential methods of intervention. In order to set these different methods apart, I like to look at what is needed in the interaction, who exactly is owning the process, and what is the connection between the person supporting and the person being supported. Now, first, we've got consulting. Consulting, that is something that lots of people are familiar with. You may have worked with consultants, and what happens is usually you have a sphere in common, but maybe there's a gap in your knowledge that the consultant can come in and fill. So there is a connection, but there's a specific gap. The process is very clearly owned by the consultant, because this is why you connect them. They have the correct knowledge. There's no question about the truthfulness. And so what often happens is a consultant arrives at a situation, a company, whatever it may be. They look at the situation, assess, and then provide a recommendation for improvement based on their skills and knowledge. And again, very clearly, the consultant is having the responsibility and owning the process. Now, if you think of a different kind of intervention that is coaching, this is for a different time in your development. Say you've learned the alphabet a few years back. You not only learned the alphabet, you learned how to write, you want to write a book. Now, it's not going to be very helpful for someone to come in and start telling you what to write about. You don't need instruction in this case. However, it could be very, very beneficial if someone comes in to listen to your ideas and ask the correct questions so that they could help you move the process forward, become a catalyst for your development in a sense. In coaching, this is kind of what happens. The coachee has full responsibility of the outcomes, and the coach is there to ask the right questions. The coach and the coachee don't need to have a sphere of knowledge in common, because coaching on its own is a specific skill. The process is turned on the other way around. And now, if you have been listening carefully, you're going to see that there is something in common between those two things, and they indeed lay actually on a gradient of directive and non-directive support. So a consultant tells you exactly what to do, and the coach is just asking you questions. To illustrate further the difference between those things, I can give you an example of an acquaintance of mine who owns a business with a consulting and a coaching side. And she says that the indemnity insurance for her consulting side is 7 times as big as the one for her coaching side. So it's very clear where the responsibility lies over here. Conveniently, in the middle over there, we have mentoring. Now, the only reason this circle is bigger is because this is the focus of our talk today. But let me be clear by saying that all of those interventions have their specific space and time that they're appropriate for. And at certain points, you're going to need those specific bits of knowledge, and sometimes you're just going to need someone to bounce things off of. And so being in the middle of this gradient of directive and non-directive support, mentoring is what we like to describe as a 50-50 relationship between the mentor and the mentee. The mentor and the mentee would share experience, they will have things in common, and they will not be specifically targeting a goal or an individual piece of knowledge, but it will more often be connected to a general improvement in a professional sense. If you're here with me today, you're probably on the bandwagon and you think that mentoring is indeed a positive thing that's worth pursuing. But just in case, let's look at a little bit of data on what mentoring is and how it is indeed beneficial. 71% of Fortune 500 companies offer structured mentoring programs to their employees. The majority of graduate students seek employment that provides mentoring built in their programs. Additionally, employees that are mentored are 5 times more likely to get a promotion. Mentoring increases managerial productivity very significantly. And one of my favorite bits of data that I managed to pull out for this is that people who have received formal business-related mentoring are happy to pay for it up to £195 per month. And of course, mentoring is usually offered on a volunteer basis or as a part of an organization, but it does say something quite significant about the value of an interaction, a value of support that you're getting when people are really willing to put a hard number behind it. Of course, 55% of small businesses that have received business mentoring report actual, clear benefit to their profits because of mentoring. And of course, in the data, we can also see that women generally get fewer mentors and are mentored less. So this is yet another reason that mentoring for diversity groups is quite important. Of course, all of this data covers the benefits that relate to the people who are being mentored and the organizations they belong to, which is great, of course. But as I said before, mentoring is a 50-50 kind of relationship, and there are truly benefits for the mentors themselves. So when you volunteer to be a mentor, it is not only the sensation that you're doing something good, but there are really clear things that you can take out of the interaction. Number one, it's a brilliant professional tonic. I can tell you every time I step away from a meeting with my mentees, I just feel so charged for my own job and for my own industry. Because the people who seek mentoring usually are quite motivated and are really there for their own improvement, and there is ambition and drive that can remind you why you got into your job in the first place. Of course, because you're sharing a sphere, there may be additional knowledge exchange. Yes, you as a mentor may have more experience, but knowledge is endless and it's always good to touch base with what's up and coming and new. Mentoring is also an excellent exercise in leadership because you are learning how to really bring out the best in people by being a mentor for someone. In my opinion, the biggest benefit of being a mentor is that mentoring is giving you the opportunity to reflect. You can understand how important I think this is because I'm willing to put it in front of my own face. And really, we talk about reflection a lot and how important it is and how we should make time for it, but in reality, we don't. And if you're part of a formal mentoring relationship, you will be called upon to share your own experience. And this is going to give you that priceless time and space to reflect and hence improve your own career. But how do you become a mentor? How do you become a really good mentor? I like to focus on three main things that I think really make a great mentor. First and foremost, listen. And don't get me wrong, listening is an actual skill. You don't need to be aware and conscious of what you're doing to be a good listener. And if you do come from a marginalized background or group and you have spent a long time fighting to get your voice heard, it may be a bit difficult sometimes to step back from an opportunity to indeed speak. And if you have someone who's looking up to you and is ready to listen, you step in and you start almost lecturing them. This is not mentoring. If you are in a mentoring relationship, you want to make sure that you're truly giving an opportunity to the mentee to speak just as much as you do, and both of you need to speak just as much as you're listening. An easy tip for that: don't interrupt. It's not easy, actually, but try as much as you can not to interrupt. If you need to take notes, do that, but allow for the thoughts to arrive and form themselves if they need to within the conversation. Ask open questions. That's a number 2 over here. What's an open question? An open question is one that requires more than a yes and no answer. Really inquire what your mentee is sharing. Don't assume you understand everything. Make sure you're asking questions that allow them to elaborate further and further to truly envelop what is the problem. Next, allow for silences. Now, this may be a little bit uncomfortable, especially at the start of a mentoring relationship, but it's truly important to allow the mentee to form their thoughts completely, because it is an active process. They may be discovering things while they're talking to you in their own thinking process. So you don't need to immediately start speaking as soon as they've finished. You can just give it a minute for the silence to hang in there, because something more important may come up. This is a very basic, we call it a level 1 listening. When someone starts talking to you, you grab the first sentence and the rest of the time you're just thinking and composing your own response. In the meantime, missing a bunch of important details. Try to listen with your entire person for the entire time that they're speaking, and then maybe take a moment to reiterate what you've heard to then make sure that it is actually what they mean, and then continue the conversation and also allow yourself to form a full response and opinion. Now, if you've become a great listener, the next step is to open up. Now, I don't have an expansion for this particular tool because as it is simple, it is also complex. This requires a certain level of self-awareness and it's not always easy. But my heartfelt advice is don't try to big yourself up. You don't need to. This person has come to you because they already hold you in great esteem. You don't need to hold up an image or anything like that. you just need to open up and truly share all of your experience. Some of the most valuable work that mentors do is share their failures. So don't be shy and truly try and open up to your mentee and show them your authentic self, because this way you can truly help them develop themselves. And last but not least, it's level. And this goes back to our favorite cool rock chick from the start. When I say level, what I mean is addressing the existing power imbalance, because it is there. Mentoring as such requires someone to have more experience in a certain area than the other person to then exchange some of that. There are 3 things that I can offer over here to then address this existing power imbalance and bring it back to level. Number 1 is make sure that the difference of experience is between 5 and 10 years. Smaller gap, and then you're not really going to be benefiting from each other. A greater gap, and then you won't be able to bring that balance because you're going to be too big of a fish and your mentee is just going to listen to you and follow your instructions, and you won't really have a discussion and discovery within the relationship. Number 2, taking up space. Be aware of how much space you're taking up. Mentioned several times, and I'm going to continue saying it, it's a 50-50 relationship. So if you feel like you are speaking more, significantly more than your mentee, check yourself. Stop. Ask questions. Go back. Get them to speak. So then it feels like a conversation and not a lecture. And number 3, elaborate. Now there is a situation in which even if you're not taking up all of the space with your own speaking, you still may be holding more of the power in the conversation. This happens if you're just answering with short affirmative or disagreeing answers like yes and no. And it turns the interaction more of a series of requests for permissions as opposed to a discussion where you want to be. So imagine the situation if you are truly discussing it with yourself or anyone that's equal to you or even superior to you in an aspect. Even if you agree with them, it's so beneficial to elaborate exactly what you agree on. And of course, if you disagree, also clearly elaborate where you're disagreeing. So then you continue to have a discussion and discover whether you're truly understanding each other, because disagreement often lies within that. You would be pursuing a similar agenda, right? Because you want to help the mentee develop. So why would you be disagreeing? Because there's a lack of understanding. Brilliant. Now we've looked at some of those things that make a great mentor. But it's also really important to have a look at what other kinds of support there are. And as a mentor, you have a responsibility to be mindful whether your mentee requires different kind of help that you may not necessarily have the expertise for. Now, this gradient that we're looking at over here is usually used within the professional environment and for professional development. It's been defined by a coaching governing body as the sort of support that is for the worried well. There is other kinds of support as well within counseling and therapy. And when you are mentoring or even when you're coaching and consulting, sometimes you can touch upon reasoning and deeper motivations that your clients, mentees, coaches have. And it's important to be sensitive whether it is appropriate for you to go into that kind of discussion. And if it's not, you may need to direct people towards different kind of support. Now, this sort of support, again, defined by a governing body, is for people who are in distress or disorder. I personally disagree with this definition. I'm one of those people who thinks everybody should be in therapy. I myself have been on the other side of that sort of relationship for 8+ years. But it's really still very important to understand the difference here and here. Mentoring, coaching, consulting, this is dealing with what I like to call the surface water. This is where the sun rays still penetrate and you can see more clearly the goals, and you're looking at the present and the future. Over here, this is deep sea diving. You're looking at the past, you're looking at very, very deep reasoning within the personality and exploring that sort of thing. So it's important to know that there's a big difference, and you need to be aware if you need to redirect someone if they need that kind of support. Great. When this is all clear now, we can move on to a specific tool you can use in your mentoring practice. It's the GROW model. Now, the GROW model is a framework, structured conversation that you can use within mentoring. It's actually a coaching tool, but you can also apply it to various different professional situations when you're pursuing a goal and you want to get there eventually. Now, we all love a good acronym. GROW stands for Go, Reality, Options, and Way Forward. And each of those stages contain a separate set of questions that you're meant to ask in a very intentional and clear way to then draw out a way forward. So then let's have a look at them. The first stage, G, for goal. The questions that you want to be asking is, what do they really want? What does your mentee want? Like in a real Spice Girls kind of way. What do you really, 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 really want? You need to help them flesh those goals in a clear, smart way. It is very important to be specific about it. How will you know that you've achieved something? We as human beings are a bit tricky with ourselves, and when we start setting goals, we also like pushing them a little bit forward and a little bit forward before we got into them. Be specific. Try to write things down. What does it look like? What does it feel like when you've achieved this? So then when they do, you can go back to that and remind them that they've actually arrived to where they want to be and that they can have a moment to celebrate it. Now, once you've specified the goal, you've cleared that out, it's really helpful to anchor goals into deeper desires. It is tricky, however, to ask that specific question. You don't want to be asking people, why do they want this? We have a difficult relationship with the question why, and it's really more of a closing of a discussion kind of question. What I'd recommend is ask, how will achieving this benefit you? What will you get out of this? Because then you can start looking at specific things that they will get out of pursuing this particular goal, and that can help you adapt the goal further down the line, or get back to that when the achievement of the goal becomes a little bit too challenging. You can say, oh, remember this thing that you want to get out of it, it's over here. And last but not least, when do you want to achieve it by? Because I like to say that if there's no deadline, nothing comes to life. We're really good at having big dreams and goals that just kind of sit in the unobservable future, and we never really move forward to it. Get your mentee to commit to a time frame. Next, it's the reality stage. And this is the time to look at what has already been done. Now, be specific about this as well, and never accept that nothing has been done, because purely the fact of your mentee seeking your help is having done something. And as I said, the people who are seeking out mentoring, usually quite high achievers, would usually have done a lot of things. They may be a little bit exhausted by the process. They may feel like, oh, I've tried everything. Bring them into specificity. Because one, this is going to help them celebrate anything that they've done already that's been actually moving them towards that goal, and this is energy that they need to pursue the goal. But additionally, it's going to help you get to know them. It's very helpful to ask what challenges that they have overcome so far, because then you can learn to recognize what are the problems for them, what are the things that need addressing, because these are always different from different people. Sometimes it's a challenge to get out of bed. Some people, on the other hand, running a marathon is just another Sunday afternoon. You know, Eddie Izzard runs 28 marathons a day. So you need to embrace this opportunity of understanding where you need to help your mentee. And then to focus that even further, do ask what specifically has been stopping you from achieving this so far. And again, this is an opportunity not to ask the why question, why haven't you done this already? Because it is slightly accusatory and it brings you into not such a positive space. And next, the options phase. So this is where you want to see what can happen, what could the mentee do. And it's important to emphasize on the could here. We're talking about potential. You know, you don't want to limit in any way, shape, or form the options that the mentee brings forward. Instead, you want to expand them as much as possible, because the more options you have, the freer you feel to make a better choice. You know, if you feel like your choices are limited, your decision making is going to be based on fear and concern, and you don't want that. What could you do? And then keep asking, what else? Try to pull out everything and anything that they may have as a resource out on the table to really create this pool of options for them to choose from so they can make a confident and calm choice. If you need to, try and expand that even further. What if, you had all the money in the world? What if you had all the time in the world? Put them in different situations. Ask them what they would advise their younger sister if she was in a similar situation. Ask them what their role model would do in a similar situation. Try to really break any constraints that already exist in their mind to see potential options. And now that you've done that, time comes for the way forward. And this is where you're asking them to commit. It's always a good idea to list out all the options that they've had, maybe ask the mentee to write them down, and then see what will they do. Sometimes it's helpful to ask what's the cheapest or easiest thing to do, to then start moving forward, grab one step at a time. What will be the best outcome? What will give you the best outcome, and what will be the easiest things to do? These are different, but they may be also helpful. Get them to rank their options maybe. Once they have committed to a thing that they want to do, when will they do it? Be specific about this. Now at this stage, you've been a great mentor. You've really riled up your mentee and they know what they want to do. They're motivated and they want to start right now. This is the time for you to bring them back to earth and make sure that they're committing to a realistic time. So we've just had this meeting, pre-COVID in the Barbican, we had coffee, and you're saying you want to start right now. It's now 8 o'clock in the evening, you have an hour's commute and you need to have dinner. What time exactly are you going to start? Oh wait, maybe that's not realistic. Okay, I'll start tomorrow morning. When tomorrow morning? And so on. Be specific, inquire to make sure that these times are realistic. And then before you leave your mentee to go out in the wilderness with all of the enthusiasm you've given them, ask what might stop you. You want to make sure that when your mentee is out there ready to go and conquer the world with all that newfound motivation that has been born within your relationship, when they hit the first hurdle, they're not discouraged. If you have helped them prepare to get over that first hurdle, every next one is going to be easier. So do ask, what might stop you? So if you're doing this in the morning, do you need to get up extra early? Do you snooze your phone a lot? What might stop you? And then what will you do to get over it? Ensure that they have a strategy, a clear strategy for that first hurdle. And this is the growth tool for you. And you can see that it is truly applicable to various different situations because it helps you identify the goal, examine the situation already, build a pool of options, and then commit to a piece of action. Today we had a chance to talk about why diversity mentoring is important. We looked at various different kinds of support and what can make a great mentor, and we also focused on a specific tool that will help you be a great mentor. Thank you very much for listening and have a wonderful day.